Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 210. Hatching. Part 1. It was the first time I felt like this in my life. I felt so enormous that I focused on this feeling and forgot to say that I was Yu Jonghyuk. It felt like dozens of meters of time and space were kneeling before me. This was what the constellations felt. Your incarnation body isn't suitable for expressing your status. I had adjusted the level, but there was still a huge burden on my body. It wasn't even a proper release of my status in the first place. Your status is disagreeing with your incarnation body and will be temporarily adjusted. Your current status is great grade. A narrative grade status wasn't something my incarnation body could afford. Even the great grade constellations couldn't keep their dignity in the form of a symbol, let alone a ragged incarnation body. However, this was enough. Kook, kiok, kiuk. The incarnations were letting out pain sounds. I saw this and quickly confined it to the radius of the marquises. The half-kneeling marquises had expressions like they lost their souls. Someone in the demon world has detected your presence. Someone in the demon world has detected your presence. Someone in the demon world has detected your presence. It was just a short moment, yet I already received 3 messages. They were probably the demon kings of the demon world. It didn't matter. I was going to let them know eventually. In addition, they couldn't tell who I was at this level. Your incarnation body can't afford your status. The stories making up my back started falling away. Fortunately, it was in a blind spot and the marquises hadn't noticed yet. This aura. A constellation. Marquis Ostion belatedly regained his spirit and screamed. Quartetto next to him was on the verge of retreating back. It was a spectacular sight, but I couldn't waste time. Your incarnation body has started to collapse. I didn't have a lot of fighting power compared to my status. Thus, I had to end at the moment the opponents died. The exclusive skilled bookmark is activated. Then why? Sparks appeared in the air and the skill was forcibly terminated. Your incarnation body is too unstable to use that skill. Son of a bitch. Was I too hasty? You have used a strength that doesn't meet the probability. The exile penalty is accelerated. I had engaged in combat recently and expected this to happen. However, the collapse of my body was much faster than expected. It seemed that the burden of extracting a constellation status was considerable. The marquises started to adapt and pushed themselves against my pressure. They seemed to have one legendary story or many history grade stories. I guess they were on the level of Rian Height of Paradise. Even if you are a constellation, you can't kill me in this scenario. In addition, they were smart. Marquis Ostion once again transformed into an executioner and aimed a scythe at me. It was a situation where the only fighter, Jang Haeung, couldn't move. Now I had no way to kill this guy. The situation started flowing in an even worse direction. An exile? Don't tell me? The story fragments falling from my body increased and the marquises finally noticed. I wasn't able to use Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint due to the skill's restriction, but I seemed to know what they were thinking. If I could get that guy's story. The hyenas hunting the injured predator started to carefully surround me. Call for reinforcements. We can destroy him if we drag out the time. There was a whistle and executioners approached from every direction. I also felt unusual movements from the nobles on the factory side. Kim Dokja thought. To kill a marquis, I must use at least electrification. But I can't use the skill. If I wasted more time, my body and the citizens would be at risk. I have to kill them using a method other than skills. How? There was only one way. The moment I made a decision, Marquis Ostion approaching me let out a terrible scream. Quackhack. Marquis Ostion's arm rolled along the ground. He was currently an executioner and shouldn't be hurt by normal attacks. It meant. You shouldn't be so careless. Jang Haeung stood behind him and laughed like a villain. It was an incredible recovery when considering what happened earlier. The character, Jang Haeung, has used the skill Immortal Body LV7. Immortal Body? Wasn't this a healing skill from the Murim world? Jang Haeung felt my gaze and muttered like he was giving an excuse. One of the people I chatted to was from Murim. I watched the ashamed Jang Haeung and sighed. He didn't talk with just the black dragon. By the way, Immortal Body was part of the Breaking the Sky Sword style. Hit them all. Kill the fighter first. Marquis Ostion removed the status of executioner and shouted at the surprised reinforcements. The remaining 4 executioners and the nobles who arrived started to surround us. I counted 3 earls and give barons. There was Baron Mellon, who I saw on my first day here. There. Save the revolutionary. The citizens ran to save us, but the numbers were still lacking. Jang Haeung turned pale as he watched the nobles who were taking out weapons. What should I do? I can't kill them. A fighter was strong against the executioner, but vulnerable to all other positions. In the end, I had to deal with the rest. Deal only with the executioners. I blocked the nobles aiming for Jang Haeung. Countless spears headed towards me, but I didn't avoid them. You are currently under the protection of the scenario. I couldn't die under the protection of guard. I could handle them one by one without overdoing it. As if reading my thoughts, a message appeared in the air. The ruler has forcibly recalled the knight. The ruler. It was a position that referred to the Duke, the master of this industrial complex. No one has died tonight. Night was over, but the fight was still continuing. No, it was starting from now on. The power of the scenario that is protecting you has disappeared. His protection has been released. Kill him. He is a guy with amazing stories. The nobles rushed at me with anticipating, and I smiled bitterly. You slightly used your head, but this was a mistake. Night disappeared and the strength of the executioner couldn't be used. In addition, the marquises who were the core leadership of the industrial complex were here. I had been waiting for a long time. Open the story. My body was unstable and I couldn't use skills. This didn't mean I had no way to fight. The history grade story Bug Slaughter has been activated. It was impossible to open a story above legendary grade in my present state. However, I didn't need a legendary story to deal with these guys. This was a story that used the status at the highest level. It was a story that the demon noble called Tentatio had once used in Dark Castle. I slowly blinked and felt the nobles in front of me becoming smaller. The story Bug Slaughter was gained in exchange for killing tens of thousands of bugs. It was a terrible and vulnerable story when encountering a strong person, but it was different when dealing with a weak person. You have absolute power over all beings with a lower status than you. This story is only available to existences with a certain level of status. A menacing air emerged from my body and the complexions of the approaching nobles turned blue. This is ridiculous. It was already too late to feel regret. There was no need to use a sword. The muscles of my body instantly swelled and I started to beat the nobles with my fists. Quack. It was literally a slaughter. You have acquired a history grade story. You have acquired a history grade story. The stories of the nobles entered my hands, one by one. Your incarnation body is rapidly collapsing. I quickly opened a hole in the bodies of the barons and then pulled off the heads of the earls. The situation suddenly reversed and the remaining nobles started to run away. Run away. He isn't someone you can deal with. Quickly. I missed some people, but I didn't miss the important ones. Quack. Quartetto and Ostion struggled as I grabbed them by the neck. I didn't hesitate to hit their heads together and then pierced both heads with a hand. Kuhik. The situation would have been different if it was a full-blown resistance. However, the marquises had been defeated by my status and couldn't resist. You have obtained many new stories. You have killed the demon Marquis Quartetto. You have killed the demon Marquis Ostion. A new achievement has been acquired. Your notoriety is spreading in the 73rd demon realm due to the killing of the marquises. The high-ranking nobles of the demon world will fear you. 50,000 coins have been acquired as compensation for the achievement. It was a small amount of compensation, but it was better than nothing. I looked around and saw Jang Heung and the citizens organizing the remaining situation. The surviving executioners and nobles were retreating towards the factory. Your incarnation body is reaching its limit. The storied bug slaughter has been forcibly terminated. My vision momentarily shook and I became dizzy. I shouted towards the people fleeing towards the factory. Baron Gilet, Baron Sarabas, and Earl Mokba. They were the names of the surviving executioners. It was the names of the executioners I got from Han Myungo in advance. Now Jang Heung and I didn't have the energy to chase or engage with them. Thus, I called out their names. It was a type of warning. I knew all their identities. I knew who they were and their positions. Therefore, they could die at any time. The executioners trembled as they were threatened for the first time in their lives. I shouted towards them, "Tell this to the Duke." The light of dawn started shining like a lot of time had passed. In the dim and pervasive shadows, I slowly concluded my words. Learn to fear the day. I was going to collapse at any moment, but I didn't lose consciousness until the remnants of the nobles disappeared into the factory. Someone muttered, "Our revolution." People started to call out for a revolution. I listened to these voices and recalled my favorite sentence from the revolutionary arc. In the light of dawn, the stop time of the industrial complex started flowing again. The anger and screams of those who had been sleeping for a long time in the night. They were asleep for a long time and now feelings they didn't know existed were waking up. Revolutionary. Revolutionary. Yu Jonghyuk. Yu Jonghyuk. Your influence has transcended the influence of the real revolutionary. The acquisition conditions have been satisfied and a new story is created. The new story, Silver Screen Revolutionary, has begun. Baihyung and the constellations should have seen this sight. It was a waste. I would have received a lot of coins. Then the message arrived like it had been waiting. The Dakibi egg has responded to your story. The Dakibi egg has started to record your story. The vibrations of the egg became stronger and I heard another message. The egg's hatching is imminent. I knew that the time had come when I had the sound of cracking. Indeed, there was no need for other Dakibis at this stage. It was because a Dakibi had been present in this stage from the beginning. A temporary channel will be created in the demon world. The demon world scenario would start from now on. The constellation Demon King of Salvation has entered the temporary channel. Chapter 211. Hatching. Part 2. I suddenly let out a breath. It felt like somebody had taped up my mouth and then ripped it off. The constellation Demon King of Salvation is looking at the Siswitz industrial complex. My field of view widened and I saw things that couldn't be seen by incarnations. The industrial complex seemed like a giant circular dome from up high. A circular city centered around the factory. All incarnations within the city were looking at the sky. This. A channel. A channel is open. Perhaps they received the message that a temporary channel had opened. A Dakibi has come. Our demon realm is finally receiving attention. Their faces looked thrilled. It was natural. This was a place where people excluded from the scenario gathered. The incarnations, who once hated the constellations and coins, entered the demon world and became the ones who missed them more than anything. Hey! Are you okay? Did you hear the message just now? I barely managed to stand up with the support of Jang Heung. Entry into the temporary channel has temporarily delayed the collapse of your incarnation body. I sighed with relief. A channel was an important device that formed the core of a story. My story started recovering just by entering the channel. Of course, the exile penalty wasn't completely removed, but I could earn some time with this. Enter the main scenario to prevent the breakdown of your stories. I had to kill the real revolutionary in order to enter the main scenario. I touched my broken arms and legs as a test. Fortunately, the core story still seemed safe. The broken parts could be somehow repaired. Your current incarnation body is severely damaged. You need more stories to repair it. The list wasn't confirmed yet, but many stories were taken from the nobles. Most of them were history grade, with a few legendary grades mixed in. In any case, I had to move fast before the temporary channel closed. I asked Aileen, who was approaching from the distance. "The injured people? There are more than I thought." Eileen's expression was dark. At first glance, dozens of people were lying down on the ground. Considering that many of them were critically injured, it would be hard for a lot of them to survive today. Dakibi bag. A familiar holographic window appeared in the air. It had been so frustrating when it was missing. This was the feeling of a rich person who couldn't spend money. I briefly checked if any useful items had been received, and then spent 3,000 coins to buy a large amount of Elaine Forest essence. "Give this to the people." This, how did you get this?" "Don't ask me anything more." The startled Aileen received the essences with wide eyes. It was natural to be surprised. It was because the Elaine Forest essence was something that could only be obtained through the Dakibi bag. It wasn't available in the demon world where there wasn't a channel. The duration of the temporary channel is very short. I pulled the Dakibi egg out of my bag. The surface of the egg had fine gold cracks. Signs of hatching. A temporary channel was a type of fetal movement for a Dakibi. It was like breathing exercises. I lightly stroked the egg and a small vibration was felt inside the shell. The Dakibi egg will soon hatch. Consume a healthy story. I quickly pulled out a few story fragments and gave them to the egg. The egg shivered and made some noises. The Dakibi egg is satisfied. The Dakibi egg wants the warmth of parents. It was really fussy. Come to think of it, Baihyun had said something. "I'm telling you just in case the egg hatches. Before the hatching, you have to carry the egg in your arms." "What? Why?" "I don't know for sure. But that is how healthy Dakibis are born." Thus, I did it. I thought it was strange that the Dakibis believed in such a superstition, but there were reasons for superstitions in this world. It was because this was a world where all stories came true. I looked towards the factory in the distance. Since the two Marquises had died, the Siswitz industrial complex had now turned completely towards the path of revolution. I broke both limbs and gave a good warning at the end, so the factory side wouldn't act rashly. I couldn't face them in my current state, so this situation would last for a few days. Aileen. Close off the council's residence from now on. Huh? The nobles won't move for a while. Thus, we should take a break and get ready. I looked down at the egg, which was shaking more and more. From now on, the Duke wasn't the only problem. Once the channel opened, the real monsters would appear. I needed to prepare some things before then. Thanks to the help of the others, I set up a room in the council's residence with the proper temperature and humidity. Aileen checked my body's condition and sighed. "Don't move today. Your body is in bad shape." "Understood. Don't speak carelessly. You really almost died." This is the first time I've used 5 history grade stories for the repair. I wasn't happy with the cost to my body. I could barely survive by using good stories. Still, it was better than dying. I still have the legendary stories, so it's fine. I confirmed the legendary stories I had acquired from killing the Marquises. The legendary story God of the Dice has been acquired. The legendary story God of the Dice. According to Ways of Survival, the story was roughly like this. One of the stories held by the King of Gambling. The owner of this story said he was about to freely choose the scale of the first dice roll. Sometimes it was unknown why certain stories were considered legendary grade. It might be a legendary grade, but how could it compare to my King of a Kingless World? Aileen had an astounded expression on her face as she opened her mouth. "Are you going to use a legendary grade story as a fragment to repair your body? Don't you know how much it is worth?" No, how the hell have you survived so far? Even with the protection of the story, the protection of the story. It was a greeting often used by the Dakibi. Stop nagging. In any case, I can't move today because of this child. I touched the egg in my arms. All future plans could be implemented if this child hatched well. Jang Haeyoung stared carefully at my arms and asked, "What is that?" "An egg." "Egg? What egg?" "A Dakibi egg." Jang Haeyoung and the other group members had wide eyes at my words. "What? Really?" I nodded and looked down at the egg. Every time the egg shook, the temporary channel was opened and closed. Number of constellations who have entered the channel, 1 person. It was currently a lonely number, but it wouldn't be long before the channel was full. I would surely make it happen. Wait. This is a real Dakibi egg? It's not a joke? Do I look like I'm joking? The channel is open because of this egg? Yes. Unlike the stunned Jang Haeyoung, Aileen was making a serious expression. Wait a minute, if this is really a Dakibi, I just want to give the demon world a chance. You can't remain as slaves of the industrial complexes forever. Aileen bit her lips at my words. In fact, she also knew. I pointed out something she was thinking in her heart. Are you afraid the next scenario will be worse? A scenario was always waiting after the current scenario. The scenario might be better than this or the worst one they had ever experienced. Aileen spoke like she didn't want to admit it. A world without it is the best. You need to think if an uncertain life is truly worse. I'm very thankful for your revolution. But you? Aileen stared into my eyes and paused. I didn't know what she saw or felt in this brief encounter. What are you doing this for? She ended up asking. Some people want to see the ending of the story. I replied as always. Do you intend to reach the end of the scenario? It is similar. Then Aileen muttered, a seeker of the end. I heard a story from the constellations of my home planet. There are constellations seeing the end of the stories. Seeker of the end. That reminded me, there were those guys in the star stream. It wasn't yet time to move in earnest, but the story was already circulating on Aileen's home planet. Aileen fell deep into thought while Jang Haeyoung opened his mouth. If that is a Dakibi, won't it become like the ones we know eventually? I won't let that happen. Not all Dakibis become the same streamers. Indeed, it is the same with people. How did you obtain the egg? I never heard anything about this from the Weni people. I hesitated as I wondered how to explain it. Suddenly, Han Myung-go looked between the egg and I with strange eyes. It must have been hard. Childbirth is a painful thing. I think you are misunderstanding something. I didn't give birth to it. I understand. It seemed that an uncomfortable consensus was formed. I wanted to explain that I never received the Demon King's curse. Then the cracks in the egg became stronger and a dim light started leaking out. The egg's hatching is imminent. The moment I had been waiting for finally came. The star stream is watching the birth of a new streamer. I looked down at the creature that emerged along with Han Myung-go, Jang Haeyoung, Mark and Aileen. There was something wonderful about the birth of life. A small back could be seen through the breaking shell. Jang Haeyoung made a helpless expression as he stared at the back covered with white fur. I really hate the Dakibi. I feel it once again. However, this birth wasn't blessed. The newborn Dakibi cried with a wrinkled face. It was as if just being here was painful. I recalled one paragraph about the Dakibi king spoken of in Ways of Survival. Listen. They are born with fate and are inevitably poor people who have to live while loving the story. The newborn Dakibi kept crying. She was born in this world, and as long as there were stories in this world, she had to love it. Yes, I made you like this. Thus, blame me. The baby Dakibi is looking at you. The baby Dakibi recognizes you as a parent. The soul of the baby Dakibi is communicating with you. Then I heard a voice. I've been waiting for a long time, a juicy. Chapter 212. Hatching. Part 3. The flow of time and space was becoming abnormal. Jang Haeyoung's lips moved very slowly while the voices were badly fragmented and didn't sound normal. It was like the whole world was in slow motion. Kim Doctor realized. This is the time of the Dakibis. In order to manage and judge a large number of channels at the same time, the Dakibis' cognition rate was significantly faster than other creatures. I looked up at the air. A sphere of white light floated over a baby Dakibi with fluffy fur. It was a sphere I had seen before. It was the soul of Shin Yusung. It has been a while, Yusung. A translucent light appeared inside the sphere and the silhouette of a person could be seen. The existence who wanted to save the world and who used to have faith in Yu Jonghyuk. The Shin Yusung of the 41st regression was right in front of me. You have earned an incredible achievement. You are the first human to hatch a Dakibi egg. You have acquired a new story. The story father of a Dakibi has been acquired. Shin Yusung read my expression and spoke. Don't apologize. I chose this. Still, I'm sorry. A juicy is incredible. Captain of the 41st regression wasn't like you. It isn't easy. I have a lot of work to do. Don't you need my help? I nodded and Shin Yusung smiled brightly. Can I do it well? You can do it well. I will help you. Only a person who reached the bottom of the scenario knew the weight of the scenario. This was why I believed in the 41st round Shin Yusung. Of course, this wasn't why Shin Yusung had to believe in me. Captain of the 41st regression was unsuccessful. Shin Yusung's voice was shaking slightly. There will be more horrible things going forward. I guess. A juicy can't imagine the things that are waiting. I will go with you. Shin Yusung was silent for a moment. She seemed to be discern the meaning of my words and was measuring the depth of the last years. Either way, it would be painful for her. Soon, Shin Yusung opened her mouth. I won't be able to remember a juicy right after I'm born. I know. Don't make too much of a fool of yourself. I'll try. Her smile was brilliant. In the silence that was like calm music, Shin Yusung continued to speak. I have few good memories of the scenario. She sounded indifferent, but it was sincere, because of the indifference. I listened to her and recalled the story of ways of survival. I thought of the stories of Shin Yusung that I knew. It couldn't be fully explained even with 100 or 1,000 sentences. Still, if I ever have something to say. I didn't know if I had time to worry about this. I might have read Ways of Survival and could read her thoughts with Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint, but I didn't understand the pain that the 41st round Shin Yusung had endured. This time I will talk to a juicy. Thus, I could only reply to her in one way. Thank you. I bit my lips to try and conceal my heart. A bright string of light rose, and the flow of time gradually returned to its original state. The first channel of the 73rd Demon Realm has opened. Channel name, #BI90594. The fragmented sounds returned and I could hear Jang Haeyoung's voice. What will you name the child? This was what he said. I had been very worried because of the name. The baby Dakibi was looking at me. I stared into her eyes and spoke quietly. Channel manager, Bayu. Did she know it was her name? The baby Dakibi reached out to me. I grabbed the small and fluffy hand and it felt like the baby Dakibi smiled at me. Shin Yusung was crying. She often cried after escaping from Seoul Dome. It happened when she fell asleep after a hard day or when she opened the attributes window and gazed at her constellation support. Shin Yusung's tears flowed out unknowingly. It was always Lee Gil-young who spoke to Shin Yusung during this time. Hey. Why are you crying again? Dok Jae-hyung likes mature people. Shin Yusung's red and swollen eyes flashed at the words. Get lost. Hyung will be back soon. Didn't you see? He left while saying, we will meet again, Lee Gil-young. He never said that? He told me. Surely you heard it? Li Gilyang saw Li Jihai standing in the back and his eyes narrowed. What are you smiling at? Something cute. Xing Yusung, Li Gilyang, and Li Jihai were on the way to the place they promised to meet after getting rid of the monsters that appeared as disasters in the 12th scenario. The place where they promised to meet the other party members was Songnam City. Since they decided to meet again here, the other party members would soon gather. As Li Jihai and Li Gilyang bickered, Xing Yusung opened her attributes window. The link to your sponsor has been disconnected. This was the message that appeared that kept appearing in Xing Yusung's attributes window shortly after leaving Seoul Dome. Li Gilyang didn't like Xing Yusung's somber face and spoke again. Hey, look at this coin. What is it? If I throw the coins and it is heads, Dr. Hyung is alive. Li Gilyang pulled out a 101 coin and Xing Yusung pouted. You have done this before. Let's try it again. Do what you like. A juicy won't suddenly appear in front of you. Flipping a coin. It was the action done whenever Xing Yusung and Li Gilyang became uneasy. How many times has Dr. Hyung died so far? 41 times. How many times did he live? 59 times. If a heads emerged, Kim Dokja would come back to live. If a tails emerged, Kim Dokja was dead. Li Jihai heard this story and asked, are you sure you want a juicy to really be alive? Li Gilyang threw the coin in the air. At almost the same time, 3 pairs of eyes followed the coin. The skeptical Li Jihai also focused on watching the coin. There was a clink as the coin fell to the ground and moved twirled. 3 people stared breathlessly at the coin. Heads, tails, heads, tails. Then, heads. Look, what did I say? Li Gilyang's confident voice was heard as the coin stopped on the heads, which contained a portrait of Admiral Lee Sun-sin. Even Li Jihai felt slightly better after seeing the result. However, Li Jihai knew this result wasn't due to chance. The constellation Maritime War God has consumed some probability. Li Jihai smiled bitterly. Her sponsor had been losing power recently, and it was because he wasted his probability on this. Nevertheless, she couldn't say anything. The constellation Maritime War God is looking at the children with sad eyes. People needed hope, and perhaps the constellations were the same. Suddenly, Li Jihai wanted to be mischievous. She picked up the coin that had fallen and opened her mouth. Since a juicy is alive, let's try something else. Huh? What is it? Li Gilyang spoke half-heartedly like he was displeased with her intervention. Li Jihai ignored him and kept speaking. Does Dokja Juicy like you better? Or does he like Yusung more? Of course it is me. Li Gilyang shouted. What? Have you forgotten the garter belt incident? My liking was higher. Hey! That. Then a shrill voice was heard from behind them. A 15-year-old schoolgirl. The owner of the voice wasn't Xing Yusung, Li Jihai, or Li Gilyang. They saw 2 girls approaching in the distance. They were Han Suyang and Yu Sanga, who came back from fighting monsters in Guachen. Li Jihai recognized the owner of the voice. A 15-year-old schoolgirl. He said that to the black flame dragon and took a skill. As they were going to reach Li Jihai and the children, another woman appeared from the Suwon direction. She was a slender woman with a long sword hanging from her waist. What are you talking about? It was Judge of Destruction Young Hee-won, who had been in charge of Suwon. Hee-won Uni. Li Jihai rushed towards Young Hee-won with delight. However, Young Hee-won's state wasn't good. Her armor was severely damaged and her thighs and forearms were covered with cuts. It was unthinkable when considering Young Hee-won's strength. The monster species weren't that strong. Are you okay? Did a different monster appear? That isn't it. There were some problems with my stigma. Stigma? Young Hee-won was about to explain only to lightly shake her head. Instead, she looked towards Han Suyang. Han Suyang SSI, please keep talking. What were you saying? Maybe it was because of Young Hee-won's intense interest, but Han Soo-young instantly started to talk about what happened. Lee Jae-hai listened to the story and wondered. I'm not sure what you are saying. Who was the 15-year-old schoolgirl? People's gazes focused on Han Soo-young. Han Soo-young spoke brief gibberish before declaring in a slightly excited voice. Kim Dok-jae, he is alive. How did you come to that conclusion? Why? Anyone who heard Han Soo-young's reasoning would think it was nonsense. At this moment, Young Hee-won interrupted. I don't know the connection between Kim Dok-jae and the 15-year-old schoolgirl, but it doesn't seem very likely. Lee Jae-hai asked with an absurd expression. Uni, you understood what she said just now? Did you learn a new skill? It isn't likely. However, I do think Dok-jae Sasai is alive. The party members gulped at Young Hee-won's words. Kim Dok-jae, was he really alive? Young Hee-won took a pained breath and started speaking. I suddenly can't use my stigma. Huh? What did this mean? What did Young Hee-won's inability to use her stigma have to do with Kim Dok-jae surviving? Young Hee-won immediately replied to their question. My sponsor has suddenly disappeared. Your sponsor? Young Hee-won nodded and looked at her attributes window. The link to your sponsor has been disconnected. It was the first time she had seen this. Thanks to this, she was unable to borrow the power of her sponsor for the moment. However, that wasn't the only message. I found Kim Dok-jae. At this time, a person arrived in the 73rd Demon Realm. You have arrived in the 16th personal scenario area. This scenario has a time limit. Be sure to return to the main scenario within the given time. The moment he stepped through the portal, a bleak horizon of stories and mountains of garbage story fragments unfolded. Yu Jong-hyuk frowned at the sight and asked, is this really the right place? Then a small angel doll sitting on his shoulder nodded. Do you have to answer through this toy? The constellation demon-like Judge of Fire says it can't be helped because there are no channels here.